Hello, welcome to another episode of Mega Manga Monday. I am Jason Hahn, and today we are talking about My Hero Academia, chapter 354, titled Oops a Daisy, according to the Viz translation. and again, I'm Jason Hahn, and I'm pretty excited about to talk about this new episode of my chapter of My Hero Academia. I happen to be a writer for ScreenRant.com. I happen to write a lot of stuff for video game news and reviews and previews and stuff like that. But I'm a huge manga fan. Really into series like One Punch Man, One Piece, My Hero Academia, and all kinds of stuff. But we do all kinds of stuff on the Mega Manga Mondays podcast where we talk about different series, and I got a couple other buddies from Screen Rant with me today who are also My Hero Academia fans. And Ben, would you like to introduce yourself, man?
I'm Ben. I write for the comics section of Screen Rant, mainly about manga and also DC and Marvel comics. I've been writing here for about 6 months or so, maybe more on the side of five. Either way, about half a year. Uh, you lose track.
Yeah.
But My Hero is one of my favorite manga currently going right now, and I'm excited to discuss the latest chapter. It was a pretty fun one, so.
Yeah, honestly, I was kind of surprised that we stuck with this one section because our last discussion we were anticipating it was going to keep jumping around, so it was a pretty fun chapter to read. But we also got Carlyle. How are you today, man?
Doing okay. Definitely an interesting chapter, so can't wait to get talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Carlyle is also a writer for Screen Rant. He is plenty knowledgeable in lots of the Marvel, DC, and manga stuff. And glad to have you back, buddy.
Yep.
But he also, just a side note, Vigilante, the spin-off comic Vigilantes just wrapped up, and I know he was a big fan of that. His words about the spin-off series has got me very interested in catching up on that one too. And I actually just finished reading Black Clover, so now I've got the extra manga time to sink my teeth into it. So pretty
Oh, and
excited.
I just realized, so Vigilantes ended this week, right?
Yep.
Or-
Last chapter was on Friday.
Nice.
yeah, so that makes two series in Shonen Jump ending this week, which is kind of crazy. Because Ayashimon also ended.
Well, I think this one goes through the online service like One Punch does, so it's not part of the normal
Uh,
like magazine.
Mm,
okay.
Okay, so
And that's
I guess yeah, so they're not losing two in the magazine itself.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, yeah, and I know a few other new ones started up recently too. I know Ben, you've recommended some new series on some of the other podcasts and stuff. But yeah, check them all out on the Shonen Jump app. It's I pay for it. It's like $2 a month, and they pretty much upload all the new manga chapters and stuff. It's we're not sponsored by them or anything like that. I'm just a big fan of it. But yeah, anyway, chapter 354, Oopsie Daisy. Pretty much picked up things right where we left off last time, where All for One was taunting Endeavor and Hawks, and I'm glad that we got a little bit more focus on this fight because I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on below them too. Like the three of these are fighting all over, and there's a lot of shots of the chaos that's just going on below them, and it's impossible to tell who is fighting, and because it is just a catastrophe of different quirks and abilities and explosions, and it's wild. Like this chapter absolutely felt like there's war going on, and it kind of broadened the scope for me, honestly. The last couple fights that we've seen in this arc so far have felt more like chaotic battles and not so much like all out war like this is supposed to be. And that this had so many characters and so much going on. I was a really big fan of Class 1A coming in and helping the number one and number two hero coming in at the end there. That was probably my favorite part of this chapter. And Hawks just being a smart ass. like, All for One trying to get under Hawks' skin, and he makes a comment about how Hawks, didn't fully recover from his fight with Dabi last arc, which I'm really glad that we're getting that. There was consequences. There was there. Everyone didn't just suddenly get healed up, and there was no nothing that they had to deal with about that. Like the last big battles are having their toll. Um, and so All for One brings up, he's just like, oh, well, you're barely at your pinnacle now. Like you're having a hard time keeping up. He's like, oh, so we're both crippled, huh? and and then All for One just instantly is like, okay, well, I'm gonna stop trying to get under Hawks' skin and go for Endeavor. And it's a
He's
little,
easy.
yeah, much
Yeah.
easier target there. But yeah, what was some stuff that stuck out for you guys? Well, Carlyle, what have you start, man? What'd you like with this chapter?
Yeah, I definitely think that that was one of the interesting things. This idea that Hawks has had to supplement with all these prosthetic feathers, which I hadn't even considered. But yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's definitely suffered a lot. I think we generally handle injuries pretty well in My Hero Academia, and that's definitely an impactful one.
Yeah.
I think probably second only to like Aizawa's in terms of severity of injury.
Oh yeah, from the Nomu fight, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I mean, once Hawks got hit at the end of the Liberation arc, he wasn't looking good. It was actually one of those moments where it's like, are they about to kill Hawks? Because that was pretty brutal. Like if I remember correctly, I haven't looked at the panels in a long time, but Dabi like scorched almost like his entire back, and there was even worries that he would never be able to be a hero again. So Hawks is recovered pretty nicely, and I think he's doing incredibly well against All for One, all considering. Um, can't be said the same can't be said for Endeavor.
No.
And I'm not even 100% sure like why All for One bringing up the fact that they never found Toya's body. I don't know why that like caused him to trigger so quickly.
yeah, I wasn't sure about that either.
It's more like he just they never found Toya's body and they just left it at that, right? So All for One saying like you didn't find a body and you were satisfied by that. Really? Like, if you actually cared, you would have looked harder or like looked into it more, things like that.
Okay,
Um,
that makes sense. I almost wonder. I was starting to think it was just like him, kind of starting to open the door to some other big reveal. Like,
Yeah, some kind of a fake out about identity.
yeah,
yeah,
like
like clone Toya.
Davi's not the real Toya.
Yeah,
I'm the real
I am.
Toya.
Yeah, I just was. I was hoping you were going there. He just rips off the
Yeah.
mask and it's him, and then we go back to Dobby, and then he's got a mask and he's All for One. That's what the glowy thing on his chest was all about.
Mm.
Oh, we're coming up with theories already. We're not even 10 minutes in, guys, and we've
Well,
solved all of My Hero.
yeah, quote unquote theories.
Yeah. Well, how about you, Ben? What was some stuff that really stuck out for you, man?
Yeah, I mean, you guys mentioned it before, but like the just the panel of Earphone Jack and Tokoyami like riding in at the end to protect Hawks, like that, I really enjoyed that. It was very fun to see.
Yeah,
And also, we're getting a payoff for like Tokoyami training with
Yeah.
Hawks because like I thought that was just sort of getting dropped and they weren't gonna really focus on Tokoyami at all here in the end. But I'm glad to see that that's sort of coming back and getting incorporated into this fight.
Yeah, I can say this is not the team that I expected to see come to the rescue, but I'm not upset about it.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. And I totally agree. Like Hawks's and Tokiyami's relationship seemed to be a lot more like focused on than a lot of the other kids and their mentors. Like there were several, especially during the Liberation arc. I remember Tokiyami like consistently trying to back up Hawks and like doing flashbacks, and there was a lot of like Tokiyami going through his own mental stuff. 'Cause if I remember correctly, didn't he go like nuts in the Liberation Army mansion and like take out an entire hallway of bad guys, including the leader? Like, didn't he break the legs of
Yeah,
Mr. Pointy Nose or something?
I think
I
I
remember
remember
really
something
cool.
like that. Or
Yeah,
like Dark Shadow went uh, crazy.
It was like a
Um,
Kamehameha wave of Dark Shadow. It
Yeah.
was a huge attack. I vaguely remember it, but I just remember it being really cool.
yeah, I know. So like, that could have been all that Tokiyami amounted to. Like, oh, that attack was fine enough. We don't need to deal with him more. But I'm glad they brought him back in. And also, like, I think it goes to show that the series can like still have some surprises at this late stage in the game. Because I
Hmm.
feel like up to this point, the final arc has been sort of very predictable almost. There have been some twists and turns, but like, you know, Todoroki versus Dabi, you know how that fight's gonna go in the
Right.
end. You know, um, Uraraka versus Himiko, like you can relatively predict how that fight's gonna go. I feel like a lot of these fights, we sort of have ideas of how they're gonna play out, but with this, it's like, we don't quite know. We kind of expected like Hawks and Endeavor just to take down All for One or something, but now we've got these two new players in the fight and people who we did not expect to show up at all, and
Oh,
it's
especially
very
Jiro.
exciting.
Like she's
Yeah.
always been kind of a, I would say since the summer festival where she, helped them put on a good music show. I mean, I feel like that's been kind of the height of uh, her or her place in the story. Even though
Yeah.
they've given her plenty of moments of, you know, her getting confidence about herself. I definitely enjoy her as a character more than like Momo because she's just
Mm.
consistently like doubting herself, and they keep on like playing with her being a strategist, and it just seems to be a consistent cycle of her doubting herself while Jiro is consistently like growing. It just feels like she has grown as a character more and more whenever we get a glimpse of what's going on with her, but I don't recall her ever having like a major fight. So like the series has done a great job with, like, we have so many characters that we're not sure if they're ever going to amount to anything great in this story. They these all all these characters who survive this, I'm sure, will graduate to be pro heroes and all that, but in the span of like this character and how they're telling all these character arcs and stuff, there's just so many of them that I'm just like, yeah, we may never see them actually fight. They're just kind of there. And Jiro was that, but they've been set up for this arc where they can just show up and do something incredibly meaningful and important. And I think that's really cool, especially getting more screen time with characters like Jiro that haven't had that previously. And not only is it a fight, but they're against like one of the most powerful villains in the entire series. So I'm
Mm.
really excited to see how her powers play more into it. I was actually really surprised that she was able to block like a huge blast from All for One like that too,
Yeah.
Yep.
in a really cool double panel. I think my other favorite part of this chapter was Tokiyami saying like, "Hey, if you could stop like bouncing your butt up and down on me, it's getting me kind of flustered." It's just like, yeah, these are all a bunch of teenagers, so I mean, that was a nice little bit of humor that I didn't feel was too like too forced or anything like that. That was
Yeah.
pretty cool. But yeah, looks like Endeavor took a nice chunk out of the armpit. It doesn't look like an arm is missing or anything like that, but yeah, the line in the chapter name, he said the name of the chapter, Oopsie Daisy, with a nice little musical note there. And I'm I've already said before, I'm very excited to see a lot of these fights animated, just with all the powers that are going on and the color schemes. But I can add to the list, I'm incredibly excited to hear All for One's voice actor say, "Oops a daisy."
Yeah, it should be pretty great, especially because like All for One has just shown how like playful he can be in these sort of fights. Like he's incredibly intimidating as a villain. I think that the end of last chapter kind of showed that off, and like his like just taking Endeavor apart mentally in this chapter really showed that off too. But he's not above just saying "oopsie daisy" in a sing-songy tone of voice, and like talking about jobber characters in comics and being like, you guys are just like those, He's a bit playful with it.
Well, that ties back to his like original motivation because he was actively modeling himself after villains in comics from when he was a child. In that way, he's very similar to Gro. I think we've mentioned that before too. So to bring that up in the middle of this fight is very interesting and funny, but still in character.
Yeah.
He's a big old nerd. He's a big weeb. Like us.
Wouldn't he be the opposite of a weeb because he's reading like superhero comics and stuff?
Oh, I don't know.
The Japanese equivalent.
Yeah. But yeah, I've said in previous discussions, I'm a huge fan of All for One, and I just think he's so intimidating, and I love how brilliant he is in manipulating, and he's just very watchable. And so I'm glad that Hawks and Endeavor aren't having an easy time with it, because yeah, I've even said like on follow us on Twitter, I Mega Manga or at M Manga Mondays, and I have brought up on a couple of the Shonen Jump things. I'm just like, I don't think that Hawks and Endeavor can take All for One out. Like, just from everything that we know about him and we don't know about him is the scary part, really. Like, we don't know how many quirks he still has. I mean, in this chapter, it shows that they're keeping the pressure on him, and there's even a couple bits where All for One's just like, oh man, this is going through my defense. I'm taking damage, and I'm also totally forgot. Like, I thought he had some sort of healing factor also, but Endeavor specifically gets a panel of informing us that he doesn't have any hyper regen or anything like that. So this fight's getting more and more doable, but kind of go back to what Ben said. I almost feel like if they just defeat him, here, then it's just this is going really well. this raid is going really well, even if Deku got separated and all of those setbacks, quote unquote. But I don't want this to go well. I want surprises and I want tension to be high, but I'm not unenjoying it at this point still. But yeah, everything seems to be kind of going all according to plan, really. But what are some things that you guys are hoping happens next in this? Are you thinking we're going to stick with this, or do you think we might continue to jump around? I'm really hoping that we stick with it.
Yeah, I think we're going to stay here for at least 2 or 3 more chapters.
Yeah, I hadn't even considered the idea that we might jump around, but honestly, now I'm kind of scared of it.
Yeah.
Because I could see this fight being one where, like, after all the other fights happen, we sort of check back in, like, how's this fight going? Oh, okay, that's how it's going. Ooh, new development. Okay, let's check back on another fight.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But I do think that it's more likely to stay here, especially since, like, we haven't... I mean, I don't think this fight is going to, like, go on for, like, too long. Because I think in a long, drawn-out battle, All for One would just, kill everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they have to end this fight relatively soon, or else it won't really be that realistic. I feel like the only fight that sort of could go on for, like, a long time is everyone fighting against Shigaraki, just like, because they're all set to have like a long, rebuilding the floating sort of arena that they're on, replenishing limbs. They're just set for a long battle, and he can just keep going as well because he can now like mutate his body to generate so many limbs and stuff.
Yeah, even with his quirk turned off, like that. Yeah, I've said it before. Like that's the battle I'm most anxious to get to, because we got Bakugo, we got Genist, we got Aizawa. Like we have a lot of we got a lot of big players on that floating island battlefield, and yeah. But it's just my interest in All for One is about as close as there. So I could totally see it, we get a couple more chapters in this fight and then we jump around to other ones and then come back. I think that's a pretty good theory. But how about you, Carlyle? How do you think this is going to go?
I think what I'm most interested about right now is what the connection between All For One and Shigaraki is going to cause to happen. Because this is the big wrench here that we aren't quite aware of, is what level of connection do they have? Or like, can they psychically communicate? Does All For One know exactly what's happening over there? You know, there's a lot of room for this to really change the direction that this battle is going, because even if you should get the upper hand on one of those two, this connection between them could very much cause apparent victory to turn on its head in a split second.
Great point. That kind of gives me the idea of, I almost wonder, like, say if they defeat, or knock out or incapacitate this version of All For One, I almost wonder if, that will just cause Shigaraki to suddenly beef up or become extra more powerful, because
Yeah.
we've shown that through Deku and All Might, that after All Might gave Deku his powers, it kind of turned into a scale where All Might is so powerful, but as Deku gets more powerful, then the powers kind of it almost makes All Might weaker. So once All Might fully retired and stuff like that, then Deku kind of started to develop his powers and stuff like that. So I almost wonder if they knock him out, then it's just like, he's gonna be like, oh well, I've already fully transferred myself to Shigaraki, so now I can fully give all of my concentration to that vessel.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Something that I could see happening, which I think would tie a lot of things together very nicely, is if like they get All For One to the brink of defeat here, and All For One reaches out to Shigaraki and is like, "Give me your power so I can like, win this fight." And Shigaraki's just like, "No," and he takes whatever All For One has remaining from him, and that defeats All For One. I think
Yeah.
that would tie into the whole thing of like, there's a big thing in Western comics where it's like, why don't the supervillains just all team up to defeat the superheroes? Because you got powerful supervillains, there's just one superhero, why don't they just team up and defeat them that way? And whenever an arc like that happens, the supervillains always like bicker between each other or something, and so their lack of teamwork ends up being their downfall, and the superhero can sort of go in and pick them off one by one as they're fighting among each other. So I think that would be something really cool to see happen here, because especially given this series draws a lot from like, Western superhero comics. I think it'd be a neat thing to see, and also would tie into the whole thing of like, All For One is a very selfish character, right? Like it's embodied in his name, and it would be really cool to see like selfishness be the reason why he loses, because it would be Shigaraki's selfishness here, the
Yes.
person that he like nourished and
Well,
raised.
I think it's interesting because he clearly did this with Shigaraki, expecting that he was just going to take over this body entirely and he would be exactly the same. But instead, we've created this combo hybrid being who is still every bit as selfish as All For One and doesn't necessarily feel any loyalty to who he was. So I could definitely see this combo All For One Shigaraki stabbing the original All For One in the back.
Absolutely.
But I think there's another element to this, and that's the like the psychic realm of All For One and One For All. I think that is there's a solid chance that this is going to end up there. Like if we are going to try to save Shigaraki from All For One, then I think that battle has to take place in the Mindscape or whatever we want to call it.
Totally. And I wonder if that's going to require Deku to get there or not, because that mind realm or quirk quasar or whatever we want to call it, I think I absolutely see that happening, and I think in previous discussions it seems all too set up for Shigaraki to eventually betray All For One. But at this point, we don't really know what the mental situation is with Shigaraki, because anytime we've gotten him to talk, he has been very vague with, I think he's saying almost like we, or kind of insinuating that he is more All for One than he is Shigaraki now. But that was kind of the last thing that we had with Deku too. Their interaction in the mind realm, Shadow Realm. Let's call it Shadow Realm. and Deku was, he acknowledged that he saw the most, I don't want to say pure version of Shigaraki, but he saw a version of Shigaraki that needed help. And so I think it seems all too perfectly set up to not have that happen. But I'm just incredibly anxious to see how All for One bites it. I think that's a pretty solid idea that they're going to push him to a point where he's going to need more power. I just don't know if Shigaraki can, or hybrid Shigaraki is able to have any sort of effect on All for One from this distance. But that's kind of something Horikoshi, the writer of My Hero Academia, has done at this point. Like, at any point, All for One could just be like, okay, well, I guess I'll just use this quirk that kills everyone around me. All right, now I'm going to go do this other thing. I really doubt that will happen, but that's kind of the situation that he's created for himself here, and they've built up the mysterious powers of All for One so much that we don't fully know what he's capable of or what he can and cannot do. So I'm hoping that we get to see him kind of go all out, because even with his fight against All Might, he was just kind of toying with him. It felt like the whole time he's just like, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and combine these 5 quirks into this big punch. And but yeah, I was glad that we got to see so much of him in action in this chapter. But let's see. Yeah, anything else about this chapter that really stood out for you guys?
I do think that's an interesting point. He's kind of mirroring Endeavor's attacks in the same way that he was mirroring All Might's attacks in that earlier fight. He's using these kind of energy-based defenses to that counter the fire in a similar way. So he may still be at that play and around point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, we haven't really seen him get like angry, because he's just always so manipulative and the guy who's in control and stuff like that. I mean, even when he got United States punched in the face, he just instantly got knocked out. We didn't get the, like, oh my, why did you do this? How could you beat me again? Like, we've never seen him really lose his cool, and I want to. I really want to.
Even in jail, he's not upset at all. Like, right. He knows that things are going the way that he wants them to outside, so it doesn't really matter what's happened, which is a very classic villain move, especially for comics.
Yes. But I think you nailed it earlier. I think even in previous discussions, we were talking about how I think that the whole idea of, selfishness and is going to be the downfall of All for One and Shigaraki at the end, too. Because I almost feel like Deku is going to manifest all of his quirks and maybe even everybody else's quirks that are important to him, because he doesn't have to, fight with their consciousnesses. There's not going to be any resistance to the other holders of One for All to let him use those quirks, versus One for All these quirks have been stolen, and we've been kind of playing with the idea that quirks have a consciousness, and especially during the Shadow Realm segments, and we kind of got that with Stars and Stripe too, when they were kind of in their mental thing, and I think we discussed that in the last chapter, or the last discussion actually, where we're seeing that quirks kind of have a vague consciousness, and I'm don't know how it's going to happen, but I can eventually see All for One having to rely on, other quirks, and I could see it backfiring, because it'll be the whole conflict of quirks given to somebody with consent and teamwork versus somebody who's using a bunch of quirks that were stolen and not and are being abused. I think it'll ultimately come down to a conflict between those two things. but that'll be a big old conflict, and I'm not sure who and how it'll get there, but that's what I'm excited for.
I wrote an article about that a long time ago that I think one of his motivations, or what perhaps one of his possible motivations, the reason that he wants to get One for All back so badly is because that contains the last existing piece of his brother's soul. And I think it would be very interesting if at the end of all this, All for One still has this tiny little aspect of humanity that he wasn't able to get rid of, and that's just his love for his brother. But he that doesn't change any of the things that he's done. But there's something left. Even when he tried to become an absolute monster, he still couldn't do it. Just like Garo.
Yeah. Yeah, I did love that parallel we were growing or came up with last time on All for One and Garo are very similar for One Punch Man. They seem to have similar aspirations. Just one is accidentally kind to everybody, and the other is not. So.
And it's great to see two characters who are similar like that in ideas almost, but completely different in execution and role in the story. It's just very fun to see.
Yeah, and it's kind of something that, we're kind of spoiled on with the current setup of society and manga releases and stuff. It's really cool getting to read both stories at the same time and see how radically different those two characters are, but having fun finding the similarities and stuff too. But we'll probably be doing a One Punch Man discussion pretty soon too. There's been a lot of good stuff in that series lately, so check that out on wherever you're listening to this podcast and stuff like that. But yeah, I as we said earlier, I'm really hoping that we stick with this fight. Endeavor has been hit, but Hawks even kind of just recommended that prominence burn should be the technique that they want to be able to use because it just seems to have the most output damage wise. But I don't know, them bringing in Tokiyami and Jiro is definitely not something I expected. And as I said earlier in this discussion, we haven't really seen Jiro fight to the maximum, so we're not necessarily sure how effective she could be. I mean, they've established that they want to hit All for One's what do we want to call it?
Like life support mask?
Yeah, his life support fixings. Is it all supposed to be in his helmet? Is that what we're supposed to assume?
I mean, Hawks mentions at the beginning it's a whole rig, but he calls it his life support mask. So
yeah, it's got the mantle and all that, but it's basically a helmet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I almost wonder if all Jiro needs to do is get close enough to plug into that, and then she could just explode it with sound waves. But then what if All for One steals her quirk? And then he can...
That's the risk.
Yeah, that's the risk.
And she just have weird ears for no reason.
Yeah. She's like, all right, well, I guess I can just cut these off now. But and then we got Tokiyami. I mean, we were talking about earlier, he's definitely shown that he can do some pretty big attacks, but I mean, we're kind of in the middle of the day, so he's somehow going to need some extreme cloud cover or a lot of shade to fully utilize his most powerful techniques. And I'd almost rather see him and Hawks team up for some sort of cool attack other than see Dark Shadow just go giant mode and tear through a bunch of stuff.
Well, it looks like that is what's gonna happen because he did mention you and I are also capable of teamwork. So
yeah,
it looks like they're gonna build up to sort of joint attack there.
Yeah, and I'm really curious. I mean, this is just we're supposed to assume that these two characters have been around this crazy battlefield that's going on below them, and I'm curious to see if there's anybody else down there that are going to play a role in this somehow. I almost wonder.
Did see some Class B people in a couple panels there, so there's definitely some other characters we know in nearby.
Yeah, including the most broken Class B character, in my opinion, which is Mushroom Girl. I forget her actual name.
Oh, there they are.
But I mean, she, I think, has the potentially most dangerous power we've seen.
Yeah. Oh man, I remember that was actually one of the last anime episodes I watched. Was with her. She was just very easily able to put mushrooms inside of people, like inside their lungs
Yeah.
and stuff. And I'm like, that is messed up.
Yep. I mean, if she just like if the others actually, All for One's mask might be able to filter out her spores, so it might not be effective here, but still incredibly powerful. So
Yeah, it reminds me of that one B guy who just he just talks and then it just creates like physical manifestations of the Japanese kojis.
oh yeah, the kanji.
Yeah, the kanji.
I think his name is just Manga.
Yeah,
I think you're right. But yeah, that's kind of a broken ability. Does he just need to talk up into the sky and then suddenly like a skyscraper of kanji is going to appear? Like that seems like that could be useful.
he's just like a character from JoJo's.
Yeah, I was gonna say it does work just like Koichi and JoJo Part
Yeah.
4.
Oh yeah, yeah. I know that reference. Um, and but let's see. I totally didn't. I totally forgot about the 1B people. We got like one or two panels of them too. So yeah, I'd be very curious if more people are going to jump into this battle. And I'm about to sneeze. Okay, it's gone. And there was one other thing on here too that I wanted to bring up. Oh, I really liked All for One's line. I mean, I've gushed about him already a lot, but I like the thing about me is when I come across fertile ground, I can't help but sow seeds, which makes me think that there might be more to All for One bringing up the fact that they didn't find Toya's body. I again don't know what else they could really mean, but I mean, again, in a world filled with quirks where about any ability we can think of is possible, it could mean all kinds of things. Yeah, it might lead to the glowy thing that we saw in Toya's chest at the end of that fight. It might be directly linking into whatever's about to happen there. But maybe there's something that we aren't, aware of yet, and that fact might be the thing that really set off Endeavor.
Well, if I can bridge it over to Vigilantes here, we know that he can basically take people who are not just dead but long dead, and bring them back as Nomu, and still have a considerable amount of their own intellect and to some extent personality still present. It's possible that Toya was dead for a while,
Ooh.
and he wasn't in a coma. He was just straight up dead, and they brought him back. And maybe that thing is what keeps him alive, his Nomu core or whatever.
Yeah, he might be part Nomu. That's a great theory, man. That makes a lot of sense. Well, do you think? Would you like to see that happen, Ben?
What? Oh yeah. No, I think that would be really cool, and it would also tie into the panel that you mentioned from last chapter. So I think that would be a really cool thing to happen. Although I do kind of want sort of the Todoroki drama to have been wrapped up last chapter.
Yeah.
It's compelling, but there's only so many times you can revisit that well, and I was satisfied with the sort of closure that Shoto got last chapter. But
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, that would be really cool to see.
Right. I would almost because I too think that they wrapped that up in such a good, effective way that I feel like they kind of got that out of the way already. So I mean, if Dabi does, come back into the battle as more Nomu than Dabi, it could possibly, do away with the need for Shoto to have to deal with that threat.
It could go the other way though, and just be like, yeah, I've been keeping him alive, and I'm gonna stop doing that now, and he just kills him.
Oh, he just like turns him off like a switch.
Because that would be a severe blow to Shoto's resolve for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure because I mean we did establish after Shoto won that fight, quote unquote. Um, they seem to all have like microphones, or I don't know if they have somebody with a psychic quirk, kind of like Naruto, that can just like instantly talk to everybody in the battlefield. I'm not sure how they're communicating with each other, but it would be a pretty weird thing of just somebody's just like, oh no, Toya just like died, like his heart just stopped. Um, yeah, I feel like that'd be really anticlimactic, but at the same time, yeah, it would be so evil.
It would
Mm.
solve the problem of keeping that going too long, and it would really twist that knife, which is clearly what we're going for
Yeah,
with bringing this up. So it would be very cruel, and it would be very in character for him.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that doesn't happen, but it would be so perfect now that you brought it up. Like, oh,
It's
damn,
like I don't want it, but I kind of do.
yeah.
um, Yeah, so I mean, I think we've determined this fight could still go about anywhere. I really like that, more people are kind of jumping into the fight, which is just consistently proven. Like, I feel like Endeavor and Hawks have always been like, okay, so we have a plan and we're going to stick to it. And then that plan never really works out. And that's kind of what's happening again, I feel like. Because I feel like their assault on um, the the last big arc that happened, they seem to be kind of the ones in charge of planning it all, and that didn't necessarily go as planned. Um, but I mean, they're doing the best with what they got, and yeah, I'm excited to see what happens next. I'm really hoping that that knife gets twisted a little bit more, and we get more All for One being super evil and manipulative and brilliant. I think he's probably one of my favorite, most I don't want to say villainous villains because that's a pretty lame description, but um, he's definitely one of the most compelling and intelligently written villains I think in a lot of mangas, at least that I've read. I definitely don't have nearly the reading manga experience that a lot of my colleagues here have, but um, I enjoy watching All for One so much that I don't want him to be easily defeated. I almost want them to focus on them for a couple chapters, then jump to another fight, and then come back. And I'm kind of hoping that this fight goes on for a while, but I don't feel that way on all the fights that are currently going on. Um, but yeah, as I said before, I'm pretty anxious to get back to Shigaraki. But if we stay here, I'm definitely not going to be mad. But yeah, what would you guys like? Well, I guess we've kind of already covered what we think is going to happen next. But any more thoughts on My Hero Academia 354?
No, I think that's it for me.
Yeah.
Well, all right, guys. Well, yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and move into plugs and recommendations. I definitely enjoyed this chapter. Thanks for your time today, guys. I am Jason Hahn, and this is Mega Manga Monday. Please check out other episodes if you're into series like One Piece, Jujutsu Kaisen, Dragon Ball Super. We talk about all kinds of stuff. We had a really fun Dragon Ball Super discussion last week. We had a pretty action packed chapter, so go check that out if you're caught up on that series. I also do a YouTube series called Honzy and Friends. We do Let's Play videos with friends. I recently played an old Sega Genesis game called RoboCop versus Terminator, and
Ooh.
it's pretty terrible. We had a good time. We had a good time playing it. So check that out if you want some laughs. We might even make you smile once or twice. I also like to stream, so yeah, check that out on YouTube. And of course, ScreenRant.com. We're all writers there. I write video game stuff, so check out video game news, the comics section. These guys write lots of great stories, introspective articles, and cool theories. And yeah, that's about it for my plugs. Carlyle, how about you, man?
Yeah. Still working on my visual novel, Elven Revenue Service. I had a little debuted a little new mechanic yesterday, and had some new streamers play it this week. So that was cool. Yeah, so still trying to get the word out on that. Aside from that, I think I would encourage anybody who hasn't read Vigilantes yet. I'm working on a Vigilantes complete series review that should be up in a couple days, and I would recommend check that out if you enjoy My Hero Academia and haven't read Vigilantes yet. See if there's something there you might want.
Yeah, because everything you said, especially in previous discussions, like it takes place. Is it a few years before all this?
It takes place over a rather large time frame. It definitely is over the course of a couple years, but as
Cool.
it's these last few chapters have been ending, it's basically like perhaps a couple weeks before the beginning of the series.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, definitely check out My Hero Academia Vigilantes. They do a lot more world building and kind of, I don't know. Would you say darker storytelling would be a good way to describe it?
Yeah, I mean, they deal with a little bit of dark. I mean, obviously, there's plenty of dark stuff here
Oh
in
yeah.
My Hero Academia, but they have a little bit more grounded stuff since we've got the trigger quirk drug was first created for vigilantes and things like that. So there are a lot of things that have a little bit more of a real world parallel going on there.
Oh, very cool. Well, yeah, check that out. That is also on the Show to Jump app. And how about you, Ben?
Yeah, so for my recommendation section, um, I don't really have necessarily a recommendation, but I just want to, you know, put out a bit of awareness because I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, but Ayashimon had its last chapter this week. And it was a pretty fun series while it lasted. I heard that the mangaka might have had some health problems, and that's what led to its conclusion, its early conclusion. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because it feels very incomplete.
Oh no.
But yeah, I'm just putting out the word about it because I feel like it's good to recognize the manga that have fallen, uh, while these other long running manga like My Hero keep going. So
Right.
um,
Yeah, I know you've talked about that series once or twice in some previous discussions. What's the elevator pitch? What's that series about?
I mean, basically, it's about just these Japanese spirits like yokai and stuff running the criminal underworld. Um, and so it's pretty cool. There are a lot of different political factions fighting each other, and it's pretty fun. Except, uh, if you're looking for a satisfactory ending, don't read it because it doesn't have one.
Oh no.
But maybe it'll come back someday if
Yeah.
the manga's health problems improve.
Oh, well,
Um,
there you go.
but yeah, and then for my plugs, I have a YouTube channel called YGO from Zero that basically its goal is to document sort of the historical versions of the Yu-Gi-Oh card game. So, if that appeals to you, definitely check that out. It's pretty fun. I'm currently covering the second format of the game, so which is a bit more fun than the first format. Uh,
Oh.
so it's a good trend.
Oh, well, very cool. Yeah, Ben does a great job on those videos, and if you're into Yu-Gi-Oh, it's very interesting. 'Cause that card game is still going pretty strong. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of the big three, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, and Magic the Gathering, the
Oh,
big three trading card games.
yeah. Well, awesome. Well, yeah, check that out on YouTube, YGO from Zero, and
Mhm.
yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed My Hero Academia Mega Manga Monday discussion for Chapter 354. I want to thank my guests for coming on and giving me your time of day today, and yeah, I look forward to our next discussions, guys.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll see y'all next time.
Yeah, well, take it easy and have a good day.